instance here of him declaring Jesus is coming. And in verses 42 through 45, Elizabeth herself was filled with the Holy Spirit in the things that and we see that in the things that she says. She gave a blessing to Mary, saying, "Blessed are you among women, blessed is the fruit of your womb." She calls Mary the mother of my Lord. And in verse 45, she blesses Mary for her belief that was just expressed in verse 38 in the prophecy that Gabriel brought her. Okay. What things jump out at you with this exchange? I mean, the leaping in the womb is probably the baby kicking, right? Moms, you've felt that, right? And they jump. Okay, so they do little dances and things like that. So things can happen suddenly, and that may be what he actually physically did. But Luke relates that to the Holy Spirit being in John. And Elizabeth, with the blessing that she pronounces to Mary, also is filled with the Holy Spirit. And it says that in verse 41. Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Okay. Any other thoughts there about that section? We're about to talk about Mary's song, which, of course, we sing today, at least parts of it. And we call it, or it has been called, the Magnificat. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't know. I think that's a Latin word. Again, I don't know for sure. But we call it that because the word magnifies is in the opening line, and that is what the song is about. There actually are 3 hymns here in the first 2 chapters of the book of Luke. There's Zechariah's song that we'll get to, and then Simeon's song, which is much shorter, at the end of chapter 2. And Mary's song here is one of praise and thankfulness. And it follows the common outline of first thanking God and then explaining why she's thankful. And her reasons for that also are praise. Okay, so she says he has looked on her humble estate, and she knows that is a blessing. Verse 48. He is mighty and has done great things for her. Verse 49. Verses 50 through 55, her song grows beyond what God has done for her to what her son's birth means for all believers. And she uses here the past perfect tense. At least in English, it's past perfect tense. God has done these things, even though Jesus hadn't been born yet. Okay, she's just now learned about her pregnancy. So it hasn't, to us, happened yet in our way of understanding time, but she expresses it in as if it has already begun. In fact, the Greek verb tense, if I understand correctly, is called the aorist tense. We don't really use aorist we don't have really exactly a corollary, I don't think, in English. But it basically means something that was done in the past and has been fully accomplished and yet still continues to happen. Sort of continues to do this thing. And it's a way for her to express her certainty of what God does for his people. So if we think of Mary as 14 years old, 15, that is pretty mature spiritual thinking for someone of that age, I'd say. And Barry, I appreciated your article in the bulletin this week talking about Mary and her song. And it's a pretty prominent example of the power of music to help us remember things, as I think Barry was pointing out in the sermon. There are quotes from the Old Testament. There's a quote from Hannah's song. In here, there are I think quotes from some of the Psalms, and she probably had recited those or sung those in one way or another, and that was a way for her to remember those things.